Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this keynote session sponsored by my company, Domo, where we're going to talk about moments of truth across the digital value chain. And really excited today to be joined by Danielle Hernandez from IDC, who we've partnered with at Domo to do some exciting research on the topic. And my name is Schein. I'm Vice President of Data Curiosity at Domo, which everyone sort of asks, what does that mean? Sometimes I joke and says it means I get to do what I want, which is a good thing. But really it means that I am an evangelist for our product and for data culture change throughout the world and with our customer base. And in thinking about that, if we think about where we're at right now at the end of the 2010s, looking towards the 2020s, I think there's a lot of sort of deep, interesting questions for all of us as data professionals. Have we really figured out data in business? Probably not. What's machine learning and AI is obviously a huge buzzword. What does that mean for our businesses? What does that mean for our data ecosystem and our cultures? What role do we have as data professionals in all of this? And for us at Domo, what role as a software vendor do we have in these evolution and these changes? And if you look out there, what's a little bit scary is it's not really working, right? We have a lot of headlines about what percentage of digital transformation efforts or cultural transformation or digitization fails, right? And so we know that we haven't figured it out yet. This is something that into the 2020s we have to start figuring out together. And we also know that there's lots of ways in which analytics and data just aren't serving the needs of organizations, right? So whether it's with McKinsey or other research, we know that that's happening. And so some of our sort of hypothesis at Domo and what we approached IDC with to try to understand more deeply was that we need everyone to have access to data and to be data-driven if we're going to change things. That data is not as ubiquitous. We might think we live in this age of data, but the reality of data within companies and organizations is not nearly as ubiquitous as we think. And with that last sort of buzzword of as artificial intelligence, machine learning becomes more and more a part of how we operate, we need a different kinds of data infrastructure for that to happen. And so with that, we turned to IDC to survey data leaders throughout Europe and help us understand what's really happening, how are people feeling, what are the places we need to improve, what sort of differentiates leaders versus laggards, and how do we use that to do better by our businesses, be better software providers, be better data professionals. And so really excited today on the keynote stage to be able to invite Danielle from IDC to share some of what they found on this research, and hopefully will help you guys on your journey as well. Danielle?
Thank you very much, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome from my side. My name is Danielle Hernandez. I am co-lead of IDC's European Digital Transformation Practice, which is a fascinating job because we are in this historic moment in time where there are only two kinds of organizations. The ones that are driving a digital transformation and the ones that will fall out of business. IDC predicts that by 2029, 75% of the European organizations will be fully digitally transformed. And the rest, now take a minute to picture this, 25% of the European organizations, a quarter of the market as we know it, will fall out of business because they won't be able to compete in the digital economy of the future. So European organizations are making massive investments to make sure that they are on the winning side of this 10-year race to become a digital business. Next year, 2020, we forecast that they will invest $271 billion. 271 nodes like this one will be invested in digital transformation, but only 16% of the European organizations will be able to deliver net new revenue streams associated with their digital investments. Now, this is the consequence of a massive lack of financial discipline. The digital transformation strategy for many European organizations still is all about testing intelligent technologies in an innovation lab. Now, don't get me wrong, innovation labs have delivered a lot of value to society and to their organizations in the era of experimentation, where we had to test new use cases to understand what was possible with technology. The era of experimentation is over now, and we are swiftly transitioning towards the era of delivering digital at scale, which means that innovation labs and other siloed digital initiatives need to be integrated with the core IT and the core business so that we finally start to monetize the billions that we have invested in digital along the years. Because there is an economic slowdown. If you look at the annual growth rate of the GDP of the European Union, which still involves the UK, you will see that it's about half of what it was last year. This in a context of negative interest rates, which was supposed to be a monetary sort of emergency measure to take us out of the financial crisis in 2008. And we have stretched it until now. So we have been borrowing money from the future to fuel economic growth today, and not even that seems to work. So digital executives, economists, investors are looking at digital technologies as the only way we have to multiply the value we generate as a society so that we can pay our debts with the future and at the same time keep our living standard today. Now, you might be wondering, what does this mean to me? What does that mean to all of you ladies and gentlemen in the room? It means that the difficult questions, the tough questions on the associated ROI from your digital projects are being asked already at the top of your organizations. 65% of the European CEOs are under considerable pressure to deliver a successful digital transformation. If you look at the average tenure of a chief executive, it has shrinked from 8 years to 5 years. If you look at the FTSE 100, the top 100 organizations that are traded in the London Stock Exchange, 18 of their CEOs have announced their plans to leave their organizations only in 2019. Most of them under a fog of investor discontent. So there are several reasons for this situation. Things are definitely getting tougher at the top. But one of the reasons is definitely digital disruption. So as Ben said, we partnered this year with Domo to make some in-depth research on the challenges, but also the best practices to deliver a successful digital transformation. We surveyed 375 digital leaders in the region, and according to the results, data fragmentation is the #1 challenge that is stopping European organizations from scaling and monetizing their digital investments. Now, we are in a data event, but just in case I have any skeptics on the monetary value of data in the room, let's do an experiment. Your mobile phone represents access to real-time actionable data, right? This is your personal, portable gateway to real-time banking, work, news, entertainment, and retail. Now, let me ask you a question. If I give you, right now, $1 for you to give up access to any kind of mobile device for a month, would you take the deal? Please raise your hand if you would give up access to any kind of mobile for a month for $1. Nobody. Now, okay, let's do 1,000 times that. If I give you $1,000 right now to give up access to mobile for a month, who would take the deal? Please raise your hand if you would take the deal. Oh, we have a couple of very brave souls. Still, it's not even half of the room. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of real-time, actionable data. So the secret to win this 10-year race to become a digital business is to democratize access to data across the digital dream team. People that work in operations, finance, customer experience, HR, technology, and security. Because it is proven that when this team gets the tools to exchange information, to collaborate, and to work together, they are 10 times more likely to produce real-time digital products, services, and experiences. That means that your organization all of a sudden will be part of the real-time economy that seems to deliver so much value to all of us that we are unwilling to give it up, even for a short period of time, even though there is a monetary reward attached to it. Now, in a traditional organization, it's not only about tools. These people have been working separately for too long. So if you want to align them, for them to get together, you need to do three things. You need to give them a common sense of purpose, a mission. You need to align their metrics so that it's in their best interest to collaborate. And you also need to provide them with a long-term plan that gives an overview of the benefits that data will unleash in the short, mid, and long term. Horizon 1, 2, and 3. And if you want to do this with your own teams, your own digital dream teams, you should focus first on the Horizon 3, which is a business model transformation. The business models of the future are data-driven, platform-enabled, and ecosystem-centric. So you need to think together about how can you leverage data, platforms, and your ecosystem to provide value to society, and how would you monetize that value? That would be your business model in the Horizon 3. When you have that very clear, you should walk backwards, reverse engineer that Horizon 3 so that you know what you need to do in the midterm and in the short term in order for your organization to become the digital enterprise that you have envisioned. Let's see a real-life example of a large manufacturer of medical instruments. They produce surgical scissors and knives, just like this one. Their customers see this as a commodity. That's their biggest problem. So in order to generate some differentiation in the long term, they are trying to move towards a new business model that I like to call medical instruments as a service, where they provide their customers, which are the hospitals, and certainly the surgeons within those hospitals, with every single tool that they need to perform their operations on a pay-per-use basis. So basically enabling these healthcare professionals to access new innovations without making a massive upfront investment. Let's walk backwards. Horizon 2 means that they need to add intelligence to their operations because this is a traditional German manufacturer. Their traditional logistic processes are too slow for the as-a-service economy. And in the short term, the Horizon 1, they are struggling under a myriad of data silos which prevent them from accurately predict the demand. That is critical for them to be able to deliver their products as a service. Now, let's see the transformation that their business processes need to go through in order to enable the medical instruments as a service business model in the Horizon 3. So, in the Horizon 1, we talk about integrating data silos to accurately predict the demand, which is a lot more difficult for them because in this business, lives are at stake, data is incredibly sensitive, and understandably, their customers, which are the hospitals, take a very, very conservative approach to avoid the risk of losing a patient in the operations room due to lack of materials. Fair enough. Now, the problem is that they have too many of these. Their safety stocks are a lot larger than necessary, which means that the patient, people like you and I, absorb the inventory and energy cost associated with that. So the focus on the short term is on integrated data silos so that they can maximize operational efficiency and make healthcare more accessible to people. The good news is that IDC's research shows that there is a strong correlation between driving a successful digital transformation and seeing your profitability grow. They will reduce costs by eliminating waste, eliminating costs on inventory that is not necessary. Now, cost reduction won't enable them to differentiate in the future. So in the Horizon 2, they will have to add intelligence to their operations so that they can deliver data-driven innovation where machine learning algorithms will enable changes in the design to drive a higher level of precision in those very complex surgical procedures. They will automate the supply chain to drive a higher speed to market. And finally, connected products will enable track and trace along the entire supply chain. But even more importantly, they will enable the doctors to know where they are at all times. And that prevents them from leaving them inside their patients, which happens a lot more often than you all would like to know, as I learned from working with this customer. From the business perspective, connected products feed CRM systems with real-time data on the utilization of their products. And that opens up opportunities for after-sales services and parts. So it transforms operations from a cost-obsessed division to a proactive revenue generation division because it enables them to work together with sales, marketing, and customer experience. Now, there is also a correlation between driving a successful digital transformation and seeing growth at the top line, the revenue line. But they still need to tap into the ecosystem to get to scale. So the Horizon 3 is when the magic happens, because in the medical instruments as a service business model, their traditional logistics processes become a fluid workflow where different elements of the ecosystem collaborate and come together to satisfy the immediate needs of the patients. So basically, the hospitals share real-time data on their operation schedule, but also on their emergencies with the manufacturer of medical instruments. They will have to flesh out in a secure fashion the relevant elements of that data to different elements in the ecosystem, their providers of raw materials, their logistic partners and sterilization partners that will safely retrieve those instruments from their customer premises and take them to a different hospital or to their warehouse. Now, this is a very complex thing to do. It's a real-time, multi-directional schedule. But if they manage to do it, the outcome is to save more lives. Now, we have done this exercise with several customers. The Horizon 3 is always a business model where there is three elements that are critical. They are data-driven, they are platform-enabled, and they are ecosystem-centric, which means that they need an integrated, enterprise-wide technology architecture where their core IT, infrastructure, middleware, ERP are radically modernized, infused with intelligence to become that intelligent core that you see in the center, which is fed with real-time data pipelines coming from internal and external sources. Now, only 8% of the European organizations have achieved that nirvana of the technology architecture. And I want to close this presentation with the three things that we have learned from the best-in-breed organizations by doing this study that we did in partnership with Domo. Number one, they integrate data silos to generate a single version of the truth that they share across their organization. Number two, they build on top of that single version of the truth because they invest in capabilities to predict future business trends. And number three, they empower their people with the tools that they need to make fact-based decision-making in real time. Now, if you would like to get access to the full outcome of our research, I think a good way to do it, Ben, I don't know what you think, it would be to go to the Domo stand, get your contact, your marketing contact to send it to you so that you can have access to this and take it as our contribution to help your organization win this 10-year race to become a digital business, but also as our contribution to enable us to multiply the value we create as a society with automation, with intelligence, with connectivity, so that we can generate a healthy economy for the future in the digital age, for the UK, and for Europe in general. With that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Ben.
Okay, so thank you, Danielle. I think we really appreciate the partnership, and obviously, as someone who loves data, I love having more data and more data points to help frame the conversation and not just have it be about stories and what does that look like. So just to sort of bring it home, I want to share a few of my thoughts in terms of how do we take this research and all these things we're seeing, and what do we need to do as data professionals to bring this to life and to think about it. And so one story that I like to tell that I think to me sort of encapsulates some of this need to change and understand how things evolve is what I call the story of a cube. And it's about a very simple, obviously cubes are something we've all worked with over time. And maybe 7 or 8 years ago when I started in the digital analytics space at Target, I built a cube that was one of the first times that we brought together digital data, so visits and conversion, with financial data around .com in terms of shipping expense and margin and markdowns and all these other pieces. And it was this amazing experience because at that time there weren't a lot of places in the Target ecosystem to get digital data quickly. There wasn't a lot of places to bring things together, right? So you'd say, okay, conversion's up, but you know what? Conversion can go very high because people like cheap things. So if you mark everything down and do a lot of promotions, people are going to buy things even on a bad website. So we had this amazing energy and engagement in this cube. And I was loved, and I was known as like, that was Ben's cube. Like I was known as the cube guy probably. And the people that said that didn't know it was, SSAS or whatever tech stack behind it. But the reason I tell this story is that shortly before I left Target, I ended up shutting down the cube. And it was very emotional for me because, right, again, this was this tool that people loved that was part of this journey for Target. And the reason was that things changed, right? And we need to acknowledge that on our data journey. So the digital business at Target probably quadrupled or even more than that over that time. So what worked in a basic cube data stack didn't work anymore. all the other systems at Target, both we had new innovations and things like Domo that had come in, but other things had sort of caught up. When I started theCUBE, there was no digital sales in a lot of the core BI and data systems at Target because it was separate. Well, we realized that's not how to win as a retailer in this day and age, and so those things came together. And so I really remember it because when I sent out the email talking about these changes, I got a lot of emails back being like, I love theCUBE, but I love the fact that we're being thoughtful about how we use tools and when tools sunset and how that changes even more. And so as I think about all these data points, all these different pieces, I come back to this story because it really has to help us understand our journey and understand when we sunset something, when we evolve with the changing data needs. And I think part of that comes back to this idea that there is this core dilemma, and I spoke about it in my breakout just a little while ago too, that for all of us, whether we're in the business or we're data professionals, it just feels too hard to get the information I need to drive the business, to make that investment actually useful, as Danielle's research was saying. And so, as data professionals, we need to understand this pain, and we need to understand that actually data is one of the most emotional things in an organization. Right? We don't think about data that way. We think about data as black and white, it's right or wrong. But if you talk to people about data, if you talk about their experience, there's actually a whole lot of emotional baggage that exists within an organization. And so part of our role, I often say, is we're almost like data therapists, right? We need to help people get through the fact that they've had promises broken, that they've had things delivered that weren't useful, things that are often, here's something that's really interesting but not actually useful. It's part of that 84% of wasted investment. And people just stop asking questions and they shut down, right? And so we need to acknowledge that there's this emotional almost trauma that we have to help people through. And when you have this emotional trauma, it's not just going to be here's this new tool or here's this new innovation. You need to help people along that data journey and help them get out of that and help them feel, right? These are not logical. Logically, you should say someone should use this new tool. These are not logical conversations. These are emotional conversations, and we need to be ready to have them. And so the way that I'm just checking time here, a few more minutes, often frame the journey that I helped lead at Target and that I try to help our customers lead now is around these three core principles of a data ecosystem. And it's really around speed to market, scalability, and collaboration. How do I get something quickly without always needing engineers, some low code, some no code? How do I have something that's mobile and easy to use so that I don't have to spend tons of money and time on training? How do I have it at a scale that lets the business drive the scale it needs rather than letting a tool dictate the scale that the business gets? And how do I make sure I can collaborate around silos? And look, there's nothing revolutionary about this. You could walk to any one of the booths out there and they're all going to say, yep, we got scale, we got speed to market, we have collaboration. The struggle I see as a data professional often is that we're being forced to make choices between these things too often and ultimately in ways that hurt the business, right? So if maybe I could get something quickly to market, but it's not at scale, so then maybe I summarize. So maybe I did it at the merchandising division level at Target, and that's what I could do, because I could only get it at the summarized level. But what if the real business problem, the real need, that real core emotional dilemma is actually at the item level, at the store location level? And all of a sudden, I let a tool dictate how I answer a question and made a bad decision for my business, right? This isn't about me wanting a fancy tool or wanting more and more data, which I do want all those things. It's about how do we drive the business and how do we make sure we're doing what's right for the business. And so one of the things that I find, right, when I left Target, it's a nice inflection point. And I got this email from a colleague in Bangalore who sort of admitted that they were really mad at me when I started doing these new things in Domo, right? Because it was different, and there were other tools that they had more affinity towards. But again, I got this really honest note that said, sorry to see you leaving. I was mad at you that you did this. But ultimately, when I saw how the business changed, how the engagement from the C-level all the way to the bottom changed, I realized we were doing something right. And so to me, I value that inflection point to be able to get those kinds of honest communications, that this is what it's about. It's not about which tool I like best, or which tool is the fanciest thing, or that's the coolest thing in whatever circles you run in. How do I drive the business? And how do we do this? Finish. Okay. So just to close up, I think a lot of this to me comes back to the flexibility, being able to balance those things, being able to drive the business, thinking about leveraging the cloud, which is a big part of what we try to do at Domo. And ultimately, I would just leave you with, you can come visit us at 214 and we can talk more about it. But again, just don't forget about that emotional side of data. Don't forget about the business problem, because ultimately, we're all going to be more successful. Our organization is going to be more successful when we harness the power of data and some of that best practice that we've seen with IDC. So they're gonna get mad at us if we don't finish up. But thank you. I'll be around at the booth or over here for a little bit, and I encourage you to stop by and really appreciate the time this afternoon.